My name is Noah Hensley, and I've been working as a morgue technician at St. Brendan Memorial Hospital in Annapolis, Maryland since 2015. Most people think working in a morgue is like something out of a horror movie, but it's not. It's quiet, methodical, and procedural. There's no screaming, no drama, just the hum of machines, the smell of disinfectant, and the soft echo of rubber soles on tiled floors. I work the night shift most of the time because that's when the bodies come in. Emergency cases, accidents, unexplained deaths. The night is when death feels closest, and in the morgue, you learn to respect that. It was November 2nd, 2022, a cold Wednesday night when I started my shift at 10 p.m. The hospital above was still alive, monitors beeping, nurses moving briskly, stretchers rolling down the hallways. But the basement, where the morgue sits, is another world. It's colder, quieter, and feels almost sealed away from life itself. My workstation was beside the main cold chamber, what people often call the body refrigerator, though in hospitals we referred to it as the walk-in cooler or cadaver storage unit. It has 6 compartments, each labeled with stainless steel plates and temperature controlled to maintain around 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Every body that comes in is logged by ID, cause of death, and case reference. That night, there were 4 bodies stored, nothing unusual. One was a 73-year-old man, Harold Myers, who died of cardiac arrest at home and was brought in for postmortem certification. Another was a 45-year-old woman, Linda Prowse, who'd succumbed to a road accident earlier that day. The third was an unidentified male found near the harbor. No ID, no fingerprints yet on record, just listed as John Doe 1482. And the fourth was Marianne Heller, a 32-year-old woman who had passed away unexpectedly during minor surgery. Her case had raised questions, and Dr. Patrick Lavoie, the attending pathologist, had scheduled a full autopsy for the following morning. I remember checking each body, ensuring their tags matched the records, tightening the toe bands, confirming that the cooler temperature sensors were stable. I've done it thousands of times. It's muscle memory by now. But that night, something small but unsettling happened around 11:20 p.m. I was filling out paperwork at my desk when I heard a faint metallic sound, the click of a latch opening. It was soft but unmistakable, coming from the cooler. I looked up, thinking maybe I hadn't locked one of the trays properly. I walked over, gloves still on, pen still in hand. The second compartment from the top, Unit 2B, where Marianne Heller's body was stored, was slightly ajar. The latch that should have been locked was hanging open. I frowned, pushed it shut, and checked the locking mechanism. It clicked firmly back into place. No big deal, I thought. Sometimes, due to pressure changes or temperature shifts, the locks can loosen slightly, especially when compressors cycle on and off. I went back to my desk, sat down, and resumed updating the case log. Around 11:50 p.m., the same sound came again. Click. This time louder, clearer. I looked over immediately. The stainless steel door of Unit 2B had swung open by about an inch, and a wisp of cold vapor was drifting out into the room. I stood up, a bit uneasy now, and walked toward it. My mind searched for rational explanations. Maybe the seal was warped. Maybe condensation buildup had reduced suction. But when I pressed it closed, it clicked just fine. I even tested it twice to make sure. After the second check, I wiped my gloves on a towel and muttered under my breath, probably just air pressure. But something in me didn't feel right. I've seen bodies twitch after death. I've heard gases escape through vocal cords, making strange noises. I've even seen the muscle contractions that make hands move slightly. But doors unlocking themselves? Metal doors with mechanical latches? There's no biological or environmental explanation that fits neatly. Around midnight, Dr. Lavoie came down briefly to drop off a case report. He's a meticulous man. Mid-50s, French-Canadian accent, always wears perfectly pressed scrubs under a white coat. I told him about the refrigerator door. He gave me a skeptical smile and said, "Maybe your cooler is haunted, Noah." then went on to check a tray near the back. He didn't seem concerned, but before leaving he said, "Run a systems check in the morning. Maybe the solenoid lock is failing." I nodded, pretending to laugh it off, but my nerves were still humming. The morgue has motion sensors and 2 CCTV cameras, one covering the cooler area, the other over the dissection table. Around 12:40 a.m., I heard that same metallic sound again, sharper this time, like the latch had snapped open faster than before. My eyes went straight to Unit 2B, and sure enough, the door was open again, wider this time, maybe 3 inches. A dense white fog of cold air was spilling out and wrapping around my shoes. And somewhere deep inside that moment, the light flickered, the kind of power dip you see during compressor surge. For about 2 seconds, the morgue went dim, then bright again. When the lights came back, I could swear I saw the corner of the white body bag slightly shifted, as if it had been pulled toward the edge of the tray. My rational mind said it was air pressure. My instinct said something was wrong. I remember whispering to myself, "Marianne, stay still." I don't know why I said it, it just came out. I shut the door again, locked it, and sat down at my desk, this time facing the cooler directly. The rest of the night was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the compressor was steady, the lights stopped flickering, but that sense of being watched never left me. When morning came and the next shift technician, Gina Morales, arrived, I told her everything. She laughed at first, thought I was exaggerating, but when I showed her the CCTV clip, her smile faded. She didn't say anything for a long time, then whispered, "That's Marianne's compartment." And in her tone, I heard something. An unspoken memory. She'd helped bag Marianne's body the previous day. The woman's death hadn't been peaceful.
When the morning shift lights came on, the morgue felt less like a tomb and more like a workspace again. But the unease hadn't left me. The chill still clung to the air even after I'd turned the cooler temperature up for the daily check. Gina Morales took over the front desk while I started preparing for the scheduled autopsy on Marianne Heller, the 32-year-old who had died unexpectedly during a laparoscopic appendectomy. The case was under Dr. Patrick Lavati's review, but since he wasn't in yet, I was assigned to prep the table, instruments, and case sheet. I had been awake all night, the image of that cooler door swinging open replaying in my mind like a looped video. When I removed Marianne's body from Unit 2B, I noticed condensation on the inside handle again. The latch still felt cold and slightly damp, as if air had been leaking through. I tried to tell myself it was just faulty insulation, but deep down, I didn't buy it. I transferred the body onto the gurney, rolled it to Autopsy Room 3, and positioned it under the central surgical light. The stainless steel tools were laid out neatly: scalpel, rib shears, forceps, bone saw, measuring ruler, camera. Everything by protocol. The autopsy assistant, Dr. Lavati's resident, a young woman named Dr. Cora Blake, arrived a few minutes later, yawning, holding a clipboard. She was new, maybe 6 months into her residency, and still had that cautious energy of someone not yet desensitized to postmortems. When I told her about the refrigerator unlocking, she looked puzzled. "That's not possible," she said. "Those units have mechanical locks, no electronics. You'd have to turn the latch." I showed her the CCTV footage on the monitor. She leaned closer, squinted, and said softly, "That's strange." Her expression wasn't amused anymore. She just stared at the screen, watching that door open on its own again and again. "We'll tell Dr. Lavati," she finally said, flipping her clipboard to the first page. At 8:15 a.m., Dr. Lavati entered, calm as always, wearing a fresh white coat and holding his tablet. "All right," he said, glancing at Marianne's chart. "Let's begin. Death occurred at 0947 yesterday. Intraoperative cardiac arrest. We're confirming suspected pulmonary embolism. I assisted by adjusting the surgical light and checking the camera angles. The autopsy began as usual. The Y incision, the careful reflection of the skin, and the methodical dissection of the thoracic cavity. To anyone unfamiliar, it might seem gruesome, but to us, it's anatomy and answers. As he worked, Dr. Lavati narrated findings for the audio record. Moderate pericardial effusion, right atrium distended, pulmonary trunk thrombus noted. I followed his movements, anticipating tools before he asked. But even amid the steady rhythm of procedure, something felt off. The cooler room door, down the hall from the autopsy suite, kept clicking faintly. Just one small sound, like metal expanding under cold pressure every few minutes. It wasn't loud, but once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. At 8:47 a.m., as Dr. Lavati was dissecting the right lung, the cooler's compressor cycled on, and the same metallic click echoed again, louder this time, as though one of the refrigerator latches had popped open. Cora and I exchanged glances. Dr. Lavati paused for a second, sighed, and said, "Go check it, Noah." I nodded, peeled off my outer gloves, and stepped out into the corridor. The morgue hallway smelled like disinfectant and cold steel. When I reached the cooler, I saw it again. Unit 2B's latch unlocked, door slightly open, releasing a swirl of fog. But the body wasn't inside anymore. My brain froze for a second before I realized, of course, it wasn't supposed to be. Marianne was in the autopsy room. Still, seeing that empty tray, open by itself again, made my stomach twist. I closed it firmly, locked it, and pulled the latch twice to be sure. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. Light condensation marks along the inner door's metal, roughly the size of fingertips, like someone had touched it from the inside. I stared at them for a long time before heading back. Inside the autopsy suite, Dr. Lavati had finished the internal examination and was suturing the chest cavity. "Anything?" he asked. I hesitated, then said, "Same latch. It was open again." He didn't respond for a moment, then murmured, "Get maintenance to look at it this afternoon." He kept working, unbothered. But Cora didn't take her eyes off me. She mouthed silently, "Again?" And I nodded. We finished around 10:05 a.m. and recorded pending toxicology as the cause of death. The body was cleaned, rebagged, and placed temporarily on the holding stretcher before being returned to cold storage. As I rolled the gurney back to the cooler, I noticed a faint drop of moisture trailing down from the door hinge, something that shouldn't be there since those compartments are sealed tight. When I opened it to return Marianne, the inner light flickered once, then steadied. I slid her in, locked the door, and double-checked every compartment. All secure. After lunch, maintenance technician Jacob Irwin came down to inspect the cooler. He ran diagnostics, tested seals, checked valves. Everything came back normal. "You sure you're not just seeing things, Noah?" he joked, tapping the latch. "These are all manual. You'd need to physically lift this lever to open it." I didn't laugh. He shrugged and wrote on the maintenance log, "No faults detected." That night, I stayed late again. I told myself I wanted to finish paperwork, but the truth is, I wanted to see if it would happen again. At 11:06 p.m., I heard the first click. Unit 2B. I froze in place, then slowly turned to face it. The latch was open again. I didn't move this time. I just stood there, watching, waiting for some mechanical reason to reveal itself, but then the door creaked wider, all on its own, and for just a split second, I swore I saw something inside shift, a subtle bend of the white body bag like air being displaced. I blinked, hard, telling myself it was just condensation movement. But then the latch handle twitched as if moved from inside. Every logical part of my brain screamed to find an explanation. Temperature contraction, airflow, equipment failure. I'd seen enough dead bodies to know there's no life left after that level of decomposition starts, and Marianne had been dead over 36 hours. Still, instinct took over. I stepped forward, shut the door, and locked it firmly. I even took a strip of medical tape and sealed it over the latch. I wrote on it in marker, "Do not open. Unit under test." At 11:37 p.m., the tape tore itself free. That sound, the quiet rip, was worse than any scream. The door cracked open again, just half an inch, enough for the vapor to escape like slow, silent breath. I backed away, my gloves trembling, staring at the opening. The light from inside glowed faintly, flickering. I reached for the CCTV console without breaking eye contact and hit record manually. The feed showed me standing there, alone, watching the door. And then, without any visible cause, the latch lifted upward once, paused midair, and fell open. I couldn't move for nearly a minute. I just stood, breathing shallow, trying to process something that didn't make sense. Finally, I gathered enough courage to approach, push it closed again, and lock it with both hands. I even stacked 2 metal trays against the latch. When I reviewed the footage later, the timestamp showed 23:39:17, cooler door unlatching, technician present, no external contact. My reflection on the steel door was faint but visible. Behind me, something like a pale blur appeared for one frame, gone the next. The next morning, I told Dr. Lavati I needed the hospital security officer to review the CCTV. He agreed, reluctantly. At 10:30 a.m., Officer Raymond Cobb came down, grumbling about ghost stories. He replayed the footage 3 times, then frowned. "So nobody else was in the room?" he asked. "No," I said, "just me." He zoomed in on the moment the latch lifted up. The mechanism moved with precision, no vibration, no jarring. "Could be temperature expansion," he muttered, but his tone didn't sound convinced. Or someone rigged it. He examined the physical lock afterward and found nothing. No scratches, no loose bolts. That evening I left work early, exhausted, but sleep didn't come. I kept seeing the latch rise, the fog spill out, and that faint blur behind me. I even dreamed of it, standing in the cooler, opening each compartment one by one, only to find them all empty, except for the last one where someone whispered from inside, "It's cold in here." When I returned to my shift the next night, Unit 2B had been labeled out of service. Maintenance wanted to replace the hinge and latch assembly. I felt a strange relief seeing that tag, like maybe the mystery would end once the lock was changed. But something told me that the lock wasn't the problem. It was what was inside. And that night, when the replacement door was installed, the technician said something I'll never forget. "Funny thing," he said while tightening the last screw, The next evening, November 4th, 2022, I arrived at St. Brenton Memorial Hospital around 9:45 p.m., coffee in hand, trying to convince myself that everything that happened the past 2 nights had a logical explanation. The new refrigerator door had been installed earlier that morning, and the day shift had reported no further issues. Still, as I descended the narrow concrete stairwell into the basement, a part of me felt that same uneasy weight in my stomach. It's something you can't describe to anyone who hasn't worked around the dead. The air feels thicker, almost charged, as if silence itself carries memory. The morgue was quiet, only the low drone of the compressors breaking the stillness. I checked the log sheet, no new admissions since the morning, and the only remaining body was Mary Ann Heller, still awaiting release pending toxicology clearance. Her husband had already called twice that day, asking when she could be claimed. I decided to do a quick check of the new latch. The stainless steel surface gleamed under the cold fluorescent lights, spotless and firm. I pulled the lever up and down several times. It clicked tight, no looseness. Satisfied, I returned to my workstation and began sorting tissue samples that had to be sent upstairs to pathology. Around 11:22 p.m., I heard the same metallic sound. It wasn't loud this time, more like a subtle clink, as if something inside the cooler tapped against the door from within. I froze, my gloved hands hovering over a tray of slides. My first thought was, no, it can't be. The latch was brand new. I walked over slowly, heart thumping in my chest. The latch wasn't open, but the metal door had a faint vibration, like it had just been struck once.
I placed my hand flat against it, and it was cold, colder than usual, almost biting. I stood there for a full minute, listening, but heard nothing. I returned to my desk, trying to focus on paperwork. A few minutes later, the morgue's hallway motion sensor lights flickered on, even though no one had entered. I looked at the monitor, no movement visible on the camera. Just the faint white fog drifting around the floor of the cooler room. I radioed up to the security office. Officer Cobb answered, sounding half asleep. "Probably just a bug or dust. Those sensors are sensitive," he said. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't shake the chill creeping up my spine. At 11:48 p.m., I decided to open Unit 2B one last time before logging off. The latch opened normally, no resistance, no sound. Inside, Marianne's body was still there, properly sealed, tag intact. But her position looked slightly different than before. Her head was angled more to the left than before, and one arm seemed raised closer to the zipper line. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I misremembered her placement, but I'm meticulous. I know how I leave each case. I pushed the tray out further. The bag was zipped to the collarbone, and I could see the outline of her shoulder underneath the sheet. Something about the curvature looked unnatural. Slowly, I zipped it open halfway. Her skin had paled further, typical post-mortem, but her left arm was bent upward, almost like she'd tried to lift it. The rigor mortis had long passed. Bodies don't move like that after 48 hours without external disturbance. I checked the chain of custody log. No entry since morning. No one had handled her. I stared at that arm for a long time before gently positioning it back down, zipped the bag shut, and slid the tray back inside. My gloves trembled as I closed the latch. "I don't want to see this again," I whispered to myself. I walked to the break area, sat with my coffee, and stared at the flickering vending machine light. Around 26:26 a.m., the morgue's alarm panel beeped, a soft warning tone indicating temperature fluctuation. I rushed back. The cooler's display showed the internal temperature dropping rapidly, 36, 35, 33 Fahrenheit. It shouldn't do that. The compressor maintained stability within a half degree. I hit the control reset, but the panel kept flashing ERR code 4, temp sensor malfunction. Then, out of nowhere, every latch on the cooler clicked at once, a metallic chorus of 6 simultaneous snaps echoing through the room. I stumbled back, heart pounding, staring at the stainless steel doors now all slightly ajar, letting fog pour out in thick white ribbons. The security camera's red light blinked steadily in the corner, recording everything. I called the hospital operator immediately, stammering something about the cooler malfunctioning. She said she'd send maintenance, but it would take time. For a full minute, I just stood there frozen, the mist swirling around my shoes, and then one door moved wider on its own. Unit 2B. The air inside was so cold it stung my eyes. I stepped closer, holding my flashlight. The body bag had shifted forward several inches, almost hanging halfway out of the tray. I could see the tag, Heller, Marianne, case number A12292, fluttering slightly in the cold air. I swear I heard a faint creak, like fabric stretching, and then a low, soft pop from inside the bag. I pulled the door shut so fast I nearly slammed my hand. My gloves were slick with condensation. I ran to the monitor to check the CCTV feed, and sure enough, I saw it. The latch opening by itself again, the tray sliding out slightly, and the faintest movement inside the bag. It was small, barely perceptible, but there. The fabric lifted once, dropped, then stilled. I replayed the footage again and again until the maintenance staff arrived at 1:03 a.m. 2 men, Irwin and another tech named Dale Sanford, walked in, both half asleep and annoyed. "What's the issue this time?" Dale asked. I just pointed at the screen. They watched in silence for 30 seconds, then Dale rubbed his jaw and muttered, "No way." They inspected the control panel again, found nothing. Temperature stabilized on its own minutes later. "Could be moisture shorting the sensor," Irwin said, trying to sound confident. But his eyes kept darting to the cooler door.
I didn't mention the arm or the movement. I didn't need to. I could tell from their faces that neither one of them wanted to be there. They left at 1:40 a.m., saying they'd return in the morning with a new sensor board. I was alone again. The morgue went quiet except for the slow hum of the machines. I sat back at my desk, exhausted, but I couldn't look away from the cooler. Then, right at 2:03 a.m., the CCTV monitor blinked once, static, then returned. Every cooler door was closed. Everything looked normal. But in that single second of static, I saw something that didn't belong. A faint human silhouette standing right behind me on the feed. I whipped around instantly. Nothing there. The hallway was empty, the air still. I checked the time again, replayed the footage frame by frame. The figure appeared for 1 second, tall, faintly outlined, standing directly at my shoulder. No features, no details, just shape. When I finally left the morgue that morning, the sun was coming up over the parking lot, painting the snow piles orange. I told Dr. Lavoie everything later that day. He listened quietly, tapping his pen, then said, "Noah, stress does strange things to perception. You've been on nights too long. Take tomorrow off." I nodded, though a part of me wanted to argue. I wanted someone to acknowledge what I'd seen. He paused before I left his office and added, "By the way, the toxicology came back. No drugs, no embolism, cause of death still unclear." That night I didn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, felt like echoes from the morgue. I tried convincing myself that it was all just machinery, misperception, fatigue. But when I checked my phone around 3 a.m., there was a message from Gina, the day shift technician. It simply read, "Did you open 2B this morning before leaving? It was unlatched again." And beneath her text, a photo, time-stamped 7:19 a.m., the cooler door wide open, the tag visible in the fog, fluttering like before.
I remember standing there, frozen in front of the morgue refrigerator, staring at the handle that had just unlocked itself for the 5th time that night. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m., and the silence in that basement felt heavier than air. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent tube light and the steady hum of the compressor somewhere behind me. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as I stepped closer again, slowly gripping the steel handle. It was still cold, still damp with condensation, but there was something strange about it now. It felt like it had been recently touched by someone else's warm hand. I stood there, whispering to myself, "This isn't possible. This can't keep happening." I pulled it open, half expecting to find something out of place, but everything looked exactly the same. The white sheet covering patient number 2021-105, Sarah Langford, a 42-year-old female who had died just 3 days earlier. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrhythmia following an overdose. The tag on her toe still hung, the ink slightly smudged from moisture. I didn't touch her this time. I just stood there, watching the faint mist of cold air drift around the edges of her body bag. Then, as I reached to shut the door again, I felt something, like a light vibration in the metal frame, a tiny tremor that made the handle twitch under my hand. I froze again, waiting to see if it would happen once more. Nothing. Just silence. I pushed the door shut, heard the latch click, and locked it with my key. I tested the handle twice. Solid. Locked. I backed away, grabbed my clipboard, and wrote down another line in the logbook. 02:50 a.m. Fridge number 3, unlocked again. Patient, Langford, Sarah. Locked manually. My handwriting was shaking now. When I went upstairs to grab another cup of coffee, Dr. Benjamin Rourke, our attending pathologist that week, was still in his office. He looked up from a pile of paperwork when I walked in. "You look pale," he said, pushing his glasses up. I tried to sound calm, but ended up telling him everything. How the locks were unlatching themselves, how I'd checked every temperature seal and electrical relay. He stared at me for a long second before sighing. "Elliot," he said. He always called me by my last name. "That refrigerator is less than 2 years old. If it's opening on its own, it's a mechanical fault. Call maintenance in the morning." I nodded, even though deep down I knew it wasn't mechanical. You can hear when metal expands and releases pressure. It doesn't sound like a lock clicking open on its own, and it certainly doesn't happen repeatedly over hours. When I went back down, I noticed something else. The small CCTV camera above the autopsy tables had stopped recording. The light on it was blinking red, meaning it had lost connection. I climbed up on a stool, checked the cable. Intact. The recording system was still powered, but the live feed showed only static. That was unusual. I made a note for our IT guy, Nathan Coley, to check it in the morning. I tried to finish my shift, but every few minutes I'd glance back at the refrigerators, expecting to see one of those handles move again. Around 3:30 a.m., I finally sat down, rubbing my face, trying to stay awake. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. At 3:46 a.m., I heard it again, that soft, metallic click. I didn't even move this time. I just whispered, "Please tell me that wasn't Fridge 3 again." I turned slowly, and sure enough, the door of Fridge 3 was slightly ajar, not wide open, just enough for a strip of white mist to curl out from the edge. My throat went dry. I walked closer, step by step, counting the sound of my shoes against the tile. The air felt colder, heavier. I took a deep breath, then yanked the door open. Inside, Sarah Langford's body bag was half unzipped. I swear on my life I hadn't touched it since the autopsy. I stood frozen, my flashlight beam shaking across her pale, motionless face. The zipper had been pulled down to her chest. Her mouth hung slightly open, and I could see condensation forming on her lips from the difference in air temperature. For a moment, I convinced myself it was just the cooling system blowing across her face, but then the zipper moved again, just an inch. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered onto the floor, the beam spinning wildly. I stumbled backward, hit the wall behind me, and stared as the zipper slid another inch before stopping completely. It took me almost 10 minutes to calm down enough to touch that bag again. My hands were shaking as I pulled the zipper back up and checked the tag. Still the same. No tampering. I shut the door, locked it again, and even wrapped a strip of evidence tape across the seam. That way, if it opened again, I'd know for sure. By the time I finished logging the final note at 4:22 a.m., my shift was almost over. I turned off the autopsy lights, left the small hallway bulb on, and went upstairs to clock out. I told the morning tech, Amber Jensen, to check the tape when she did her first temperature round. She laughed, thinking I was joking about the fridge unlocking itself. I told her, dead serious, just check it. Don't touch anything else until you do. When I came back the next evening, the tape was gone. Amber said it had already been peeled off when she arrived, and she assumed I'd removed it before I left, but I hadn't, and the logbook entry from that morning said, "Fridge number 3, stable temperature, no anomalies." I asked her if the door was locked when she checked it. She nodded. Yeah, tight shut. But the tape, that tape had been sealed with my signature, and now it's gone. I decided to check the CCTV recordings myself that night. The system had come back online around 6:15 a.m. after a short network reset. I pulled up the footage from the early hours. At 3:46 a.m., I saw myself approaching the refrigerator, flashlight in hand. But what I saw next made my stomach twist. The refrigerator door opened before I even reached it, slowly, smoothly, as if someone inside was pushing it open. I rewound it twice, same thing, and no one else was in the room. I burned that footage onto a USB drive and placed it in my locker. That was the night I started documenting everything. The time, the temperature readings, every lock test. The events didn't stop, and the next few nights would become even more unsettling. The next night, I arrived at Ridgeway County Hospital a little earlier than usual. The air outside was sharp and cold, and the streetlights in the back alley flickered with that dull orange hue that always made the basement entrance look like a forgotten tunnel. I clocked in at 10:56 p.m., grabbed my lab coat, and walked straight down to the morgue. The corridor lights were dim as always, humming faintly.
That smell, a mix of disinfectant, cold metal, and something faintly sweet from the preservatives, hit me before I even opened the door. I checked the logbook immediately. Amber had left a short note. All units stable, temp 38.5 degrees Fahrenheit, no unlocks reported. Resealed fridge number 3 with new tag. She'd initialed it with AJ, dated October 15th, 2021, 9:17 a.m. But when I opened the refrigerator bay, the tag she'd written wasn't there. The metal surface was clean, no residue, no sign of tape. I double-checked the hinges, tight, the lock, firm. I stood there a full minute, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind or if someone was messing with me deliberately. I started my night shift tasks, verifying the temperature logs, sterilizing the autopsy tables, checking the tissue sample cabinet, restocking gloves and scalpels. Routine work usually calms me down. But every time I passed that row of refrigerators, my eyes went to number 3. It felt like being watched, even though I knew there were no eyes left to watch me. By midnight, the place was silent except for the whir of the cooling units. I was filling out some chain of custody forms when I heard it again, a faint clicking sound, not the usual compressor noise, but softer, like someone flicking a pen. I turned my head and saw it. The small red temperature display on fridge 3 was flashing between 38 degrees and 42 degrees, up and down, like the sensor couldn't stabilize. Then the handle clicked. I froze mid-step. I walked toward it slowly, clipboard still in hand, the sound of my shoes echoing against the tiles. I could see my reflection on the polished surface of the door, my own face, pale, eyes wide, and behind me, the shadow of the other refrigerators. I pressed the lock down again firmly and held it there. It stayed locked, but just as I turned away, I heard a tap from inside. Not a metallic vibration, not expansion noise, a single distinct tap, like a knuckle hitting steel. I whispered, "Sarah, if that's you, stop." Nothing. Then 2 more taps. My whole body went cold. My hands started shaking, and I found myself stepping backward without realizing it. I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up my phone and started recording a video. I pointed the camera right at the refrigerator and narrated quietly, October 15th, Ridgeway County Hospital morgue, time 12:28 a.m., fridge number 3, door locked, unknown internal noise. As soon as I said noise, I heard the click again. The door unlocked in front of me. The LED indicator above the handle turned green, just like when you manually turned the key. The latch released itself with that exact same sound. The door didn't open all the way this time, just a few inches, enough for a strip of fog to roll out. I took 1 step forward, holding the camera steady, and the cold air hit my face like a freezer blast. My hand reached for the handle, but something inside me screamed not to. Then, from the darkness inside, I heard something fall, like a soft thud. I turned the lights brighter, leaned forward, and saw it. The ID tag from the patient's toe had slipped off and was lying on the floor of the fridge. The metal wire was unhooked, the tag half crumpled. My mind raced. There was no air circulation strong enough to knock that off. It had to be moved manually. I shut the door immediately and turned the key. I didn't even write the log that time. I just sat down staring at the camera feed on my monitor. A minute later, I saw it happen again in real time. The door handle twitching, the latch lifting by itself, the door easing open. The MOC motion sensor light in that area even flickered, as if someone invisible had walked past. The recording caught it all. At 2:09 a.m., Dr. Rourke came down unexpectedly. He had been on call for a late-night case consult and wanted to grab a file from the archive cabinet near the autopsy room. He saw me sitting there, white as a sheet, staring at the CCTV feed. He said, "Elliot, you look like you've seen a ghost." I turned to him and said, "Sir, I think the refrigerator's been opening on its own again." He chuckled, thinking I was joking. "Then call maintenance. It's probably the lock." I didn't even respond. I just turned the monitor toward him and hit play on the footage I had recorded 20 minutes earlier. We both watched the latch lift by itself.
He stopped laughing. He leaned closer, frowning. "Who else has access to this morgue?" I told him, "Just me, Amber, and him." The door log showed only our cards for the past week. He stood there for a long time, then finally said, "Don't say anything about this to anyone else yet. We'll check the system in the morning." Then he turned, opened one of the storage drawers, and began flipping through paperwork like nothing strange had just happened. Before he left, he paused at the doorway and said, "Don't stay alone down here tonight, Elliot. If it happens again, note the time. We'll look for environmental patterns." He tried to sound rational, scientific, but his voice shook slightly when he said it. After he left, I sat there staring at the monitor until 4 a.m. The door didn't move again that night, but when I checked the footage from the previous shift, I noticed something that chilled me more than the unlocking itself. Every time the door opened by itself, the temperature reading above the unit flashed to 19 degrees Fahrenheit for exactly 3 seconds before stabilizing again. It shouldn't even be able to drop that fast. The unit was programmed to alarm at any fluctuation beyond 2 degrees, but the system registered no alert. It was like it never happened. At 5:03 a.m., when the maintenance guy, Robert Lund, came in to check the compressors, I told him everything. He ran diagnostics on the locking mechanism, temperature control, and internal sensors. Everything came back normal. "This unit's fine," he said, tapping the side. "Better than most I've seen." I asked him if the electromagnetic locks could fail in a way that made them unlock themselves. He shook his head. "Nope, only if someone disengages it from the control terminal." That night I went home but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that door slowly easing open, the cold fog spilling out, and that tag lying on the floor. The next evening, when I came back to work, things would escalate beyond anything I was ready for. Because by then, Sarah Langford's body wouldn't be in her refrigerator anymore.
When I walked into the morgue on the evening of October 16th, 2021, I knew something was wrong the moment the door shut behind me. The air felt too cold, even for that basement. It wasn't the usual controlled chill of the refrigerators. It was a biting cold that stung the skin. I could see my breath when I exhaled, and that had never happened before. I set my coffee down on the counter, grabbed my clipboard, and started the usual round. The temperature gauge on the wall flickered for a moment before showing 34 degrees Fahrenheit, a few degrees lower than the programmed limit. I frowned, adjusted the setting back up to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and checked the logs. Everything looked normal. But when I turned toward refrigerator number 3, I stopped dead in my tracks. The door was slightly open. Not unlocked. Open. The steel handle was hanging loose, and the evidence tape I had placed the previous night was torn clean through. My first thought was that someone from the day shift had pulled the body out for an examination or recheck. But then I saw the tag, Sarah Langford's tag, still hanging on the handle. Her body should have been inside, not her ID tag. I slowly walked closer, my shoes squeaking softly on the tiles, and I looked inside. The stretcher tray was empty, completely empty. No body bag, no sheet, no record of transfer. The tray still had the indentation from where the bag had been, the frost pattern undisturbed, except for one faint streak, as if something had been dragged out. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I checked the clipboard. No entries, no release orders, no re-autopsy requests. No one had permission to remove that body. I immediately called upstairs to the pathology office. The night attendant, Dr. Linda Moreau, answered. I asked if any transfers had been approved. She checked the system and said, "No, Elliot, all bodies are accounted for." Why? I didn't answer. I just said, "We're missing Langford." There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Stay there. Don't touch anything. I'm coming down." When she arrived about 5 minutes later, I was still standing by the open refrigerator, trying to understand what I was seeing. She looked inside, frowned, then turned to me. "Are you absolutely sure you didn't move her?" I said, "I swear, I didn't even open that door tonight." She crouched down, checking the seals, then ran her hand along the tray. "No signs of mechanical removal," she said softly. "No smudges, no dragging marks." She looked at the security camera in the corner and told me to pull up the footage. We went to the monitor. I rewound the video to 6:03 p.m., the time I had entered the morgue. Everything before that showed the room completely still. But then, around 5:57 p.m., something strange happened.
The camera glitched for 4 seconds, just static and flickering light. When the image returned, fridge number 3's door was open, and the tray was empty. There was no motion in between, no one entering, no one leaving. Just an empty slot where the body had been. Dr. Moreau leaned forward, squinting. She said, "This footage could be corrupted." But the timestamp was correct. The rest of the feed was stable. Only that one frame was gone. We both looked at each other, neither of us speaking for a full minute. Then she said, "We have to file this. Go upstairs, write an incident report. I'll lock the area down." I did exactly that. I wrote everything: time, observation, camera glitch, missing cadaver. When I came back 15 minutes later with the security supervisor, Officer Grant Malloy, Dr. Moreau was standing outside the morgue's door with her arms folded, pale and trembling. She said she'd gone to recheck the other refrigerators, and when she opened number 3 again, the body bag was back inside. I thought she was joking. I pushed past her, opened the door, and sure enough, there it was. Same white body bag, zipped to the top, tag hanging loosely from the zipper, the same faint indentation in the frost pattern, now filled. I grabbed the clipboard and checked the new temperature reading, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Completely normal. The air was still cold, but not that biting cold anymore. Grant didn't say anything for a while. Then he mumbled, "You two been here too long tonight. Maybe you both need air." I didn't respond. I just walked up to the refrigerator and stared at it, listening to the faint buzz of the compressor. I reached out, unzipped the bag halfway, and confirmed it was her. Same scar along the sternum from the autopsy incision, same face, same pale blue nail polish she'd had when she'd come in. But there was something different about her expression. Her lips were slightly parted, and the corner of her mouth was curved upward, almost like she was smirking. I zipped it back up, locked the refrigerator again, and stepped away. None of us said much after that. Dr. Moreau wrote the supplementary report, Grant signed off, and I just sat at my desk until dawn. I didn't even clock out properly. The next day, when the maintenance team came to inspect the units again, they found no mechanical issues. The control log showed no power fluctuations, no manual unlocks recorded. The electromagnetic lock on fridge number 3 showed normal engagement and disengagement cycles, exactly matching the number of times I'd opened it with my key. But there was one line in the system log that didn't make sense. At 4:57 p.m., when the footage glitched, the fridge's internal sensor recorded a sudden spike in heat, 124 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 second, then back to normal. There was no way that could physically happen without melting the insulation or tripping the alarms. Yet it did, and the hospital system didn't alert anyone. That was the last time I worked a full night shift alone. A week later, the administration quietly replaced the entire refrigerator line, citing malfunctioning locks as the reason. No one mentioned the missing body. No one mentioned the glitch. The official logbook even had that entire page torn out. I still work there, though not in the basement anymore. I help with pathology prep upstairs. Sometimes I still hear the compressors from the floor below. On quiet nights, when I stay late to finish reports, I swear I can still hear that faint click echoing up through the vents, like a door unlocking itself. And every October, when the air gets cold, I think about Sarah Langford and that missing 4 seconds of footage. I think about how no one ever explained what happened and how the refrigerator that should have kept her still never stayed locked for long. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe stress made me see more than what was there. But deep down, I know what I saw. And I know that sometimes the dead don't stay where you leave them.